Welcome to Onyx City. It's a sci-fi future Mobius run by a mysterious council of five masked individuals and potentially the most unique setting of any Archie Sonic story I've ever read. Now, I personally love me some dystopian future societies, but I'm actually a little bit picky when it comes to them. I find myself much preferring a corrupt society run by a weird shadow cult over burning wastelands like we see in Sonic 06's dystopia. Onyx City is exactly that. It's corrupt to its core, even though it looks shiny and good on the outside. Through Onyx City, we're introduced to some of my favorite Archie characters in that process. However, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, so in the immortal words of Julie Andrews, let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. This mysterious council running Onyx City has one goal, and it's to guide their city into prosperity, but that can only be accomplished through forced labor, which is enforced by giant mechs that look suspiciously like swap bots. If you try to get out of your assigned work schedule, these large mechs will make sure that you are sent in and you're encouraged to snitch on your fellow citizen. Luckily, Silver is no snitch, and he's around to witness one particular worker being pulled into work, and he uses his telekinetic powers to save the day by managing to buy this Mobian some more time to escape from the robots. This variant of Silver is a little bit different than the ones we've previously seen, and it's largely due to the fact that this event takes place post-Super Genesis wave, and so Silver has undergone a few changes since the comic reboot. I actually really enjoy his portrayal here as he talks to himself, and we learn that, like Sonic, Silver is actually just homeless in this world. He has some kind of garbage tent set up in an alley where he lives and practices his powers, but otherwise he doesn't seem to have his own home and seems to be living under the radar when it comes to work. Now, while practicing, Silver doesn't go unnoticed. There's a strange blue scientist who is caught examining Silver, and the scientist would find him incredibly impressive due to the fact that Silver has some psychic abilities like none other. So, this blue man would introduce himself as Professor von Schlemmer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the only German character to ever appear inside of Archie Sonic. Silver would realize that this professor is from the same science center run by the council, and that he wants no part in any of that. But von Schlemmer thinks that Silver might be the key to counter the Genesis portals which have been appearing, and they're completely new to us, the reader. Now, as if fate were watching, one such portal opens up to introduce Silver to what they are, just as he's inquiring about them. This purple portal seems to lead into a seemingly never-ending abyss with all kinds of creepy hands grabbing at you. Thankfully though, with Silver's abilities, he manages to get himself and von Schlemmer out of there without either of them getting hurt. And, showing that the professor's theory was correct, Silver even manages to close the rift using his powers. This is great news for von Schlemmer. Silver has exactly the power that he's been looking for, and it turns out that the world is on the verge of total collapse, so Silver might be the only way to prevent that. Thus, Silver has no choice but to come with von Schlemmer to the council, unless he really wants reality to end. Meanwhile, we would learn that the council, unsurprisingly, is completely involved with these portals, and with the exception of one member, they seem pretty disinterested in the fact that one of their portals that they just opened managed to be closed. However, this fifth council member would remain interested, and we would get a glimpse into an all too familiar portal from the game Sonic Generations, so there's a bit of a tie-in going on here. Anyway, Professor von Schlemmer would take Silver to the council and explain that by using Silver's psychic powers, he's found a way to close these Genesis portals that have been opening up and could save the world. But things don't go super ideally for von Schlemmer, as Silver does not feel confident enough to use his abilities in front of the council, as he has no idea what they'll do to him once they realize that he has these powers. However, interestingly, Silver would get a ding in his mind as a mysterious voice would tell him to return here tonight to meet with them. And shortly after this, due to the fact that Silver didn't show any of his abilities, von Schlemmer is essentially kicked out of there, and Silver has to leave and go make sure that von Schlemmer is okay. I honestly feel really bad for the guy when he says, "Von Schlemmer makes a joke of himself again. As usual, ach, is not the first time. I always forget how much it hurts though." Which really makes me feel sad for the guy, and also makes me realize I cannot do a German accent to save my life. I feel especially sad for von Schlemmer because we would learn that he isn't some insane scientist who can't do anything. He's actually pretty impressive in his abilities. We would learn that he has these little Sonic robots that he's built, which look conveniently a lot like Sonic. If you're curious, this one here is saying hi in binary. But Schlemmer has some really cool inventions as well from that. He has a not so delicate but still pretty delicate laser, and he also has Chekhov's gun, I mean the bigger maker, which is demonstrated to make anything that goes inside of it bigger and tougher. But the professor's main area of interest has been the Genesis portals. We'd learned that 200 years ago, events in the modern day Mobius caused reality to be shattered, and these portals can lead to completely different dimensions. Now, with Schlemmer feeling better, the two of them would head out to go investigate the mysterious voice that Silver heard in his head. But they would have to watch out for the council's robots who are enforcing curfew and, of course, making sure that nobody is where they shouldn't be inside of the council's home building. Eventually, Silver would meet his mysterious voice, and shocker, it is the fifth council member. This council member is Gold, not just in appearance, but also literally in her name. And although she has a lot to explain, her time would be up as they would be immediately caught by the council. Interestingly, Silver and Gold would find their minds linked, with Gold's intense worries vocalizing themselves in Silver's mind. The trio here would need to hold off against these crazy bots who fire energy whips at them through their arm cannons. Unfortunately though, try as they might, they are just outnumbered, and after getting whipped, Silver and his friends are captured. The group ends up strapped down to tables, and Gold's mask is forcibly put back on her, but this time with some kind of control mechanism in place. Von Schlemmer would chastise the council for doing this, as it goes far beyond science and it's becoming just torture at this point. However, it's clear that the council is beyond any kind of ethics, as they make it clear the only thing they want to do is pursue scientific discovery, and they're willing to go beyond anything. Gold is forced to open up a portal with a shazap, and then the group is forced into the portal. Silver finds that his powers are dampened and he's unable to do anything to save the day this time. Not only that, but the council also says his iconic line as they tell him that it's no use. With that, Silver and the professor are launched into the portal, and to ordinary citizens this might have finished them off. But these two are far from ordinary. Through sheer luck, Von Schlemmer manages to break free, and then he gets Silver out of his constraints with the help of his bits, which are those little sonic robots I mentioned before. I admire the dedication to using binary whenever they talk, but oh boy, does it ever take a lot of ones and zeros to say something as simple as saying free, which is what this robot is saying here. The gang starts to fly out of the portal, but a strange being from the depths chases them. Though the group manages to get out, the creature can't be far behind. On top of that, Silver is put in pain as he feels the torture device that continues to hurt Gold. They would manage to free Gold from her mask, and the council would try to flee out of there, but Silver would keep them trapped with his psychic abilities. Though before a real showdown could occur between the three and the council here, the hand of that aforementioned creature would make its way through the portal, and it would crush the council members as it destroys the building they're in. And as the hand rises up, we would see that the council members haven't been destroyed, but rather they've been turned to stone. And the trio are knocked away by this creature as it makes its way through the portal. Thankfully, Silver uses his powers to save his new friends, and the big bad is set free. This creature who we would see emerge from the portal is known as the Second Devourer, and he's the consumer of worlds. And I've got to say, I'm actually a really big fan of his design. It's super cool looking. Despite Silver's ability, the gang would hit the ground hard, and the red bits would let us know that Von Schlemmer is KO'd. Silver would manage to protect his friends as the Second Devourer turns everyone into stone, and we would learn from Gold that she has previously seen this before. Gold, as it turns out, is from another dimension, where the Second Devourer appeared and began to set loose his ruinous powers on her entire society. Gold managed to escape by creating one of these portals, and by escape I mean she just barely got out of there in time. We would learn that when she arrived into Onyx City, she was immediately found by the council, and Gold knew that the council had malicious goals, but she had no choice but to follow them, as she wanted to avoid having them alter her mind for their goals. Gold then says Silver's iconic line as well, as she says that it's no use. And this gets Silver really angry, which is something that I really enjoy. I like a bit of fourth wall breaking, as Silver complains about how often people have been using that line around him, and honestly, it's funny. Silver is ready to fix this, or die trying. He would take Von Schlemmer and Gold back to the professor's lab in order to figure something out. The group would hide out from the Second Devourer, and Gold would be able to use her powers to bring Von Schlemmer back. Though the situation was dire, Silver would remind his friends that he can shut these portals, and thus, with enough power, he might be able to lock the Second Devourer out. So it's time for the bigger maker to come back. That's right, it'll not only make Silver big, but it'll also amplify his powers. The only thing is that it'll need to be recalibrated for a living being, and in order to do that in such a short amount of time would require a whole lot of brain power. Something that honestly Von Schlemmer just doesn't have at the moment. So Gold has a plan. She has the trio, along with the bits, hold hands, and she manages to link them using her powers, which grants Schlemmer the smarts he needs. Schlemmer can keep things running on the ground as long as they're linked, and so Silver has to race the clock before he starts to shrink back down. Once through the machine, and after a moment, Silver is grown to gigantic proportions. and it's time to take on this beast. Though bigger, Silver is still not an experienced fighter, and he would struggle a little bit against this monster. But at his lowest, Gold encourages Silver to keep going, and they'll continue to believe in him like he believes in them. It's pretty sweet, I actually really enjoy it. With that, Silver is able to push the second Devourer away, and he makes his way to the big portal. Silver throws some crumpled up debris like pocket sand into the monster's face, and then grabs him before throwing him into the portal before closing it off for good. However, time would be running out as Silver would start to shrink, but thankfully he would manage to seal it off just in time. With that, the day is saved, and we would realize that Silver actually never introduced himself to any of his compatriots throughout this whole ordeal. Once introduced, the day is saved, and the battle is won. But the war is far from over. With this beast gone, it's only a matter of time before the council would return, and the second Devourer hasn't been permanently stopped. It's just a band-aid on a much bigger problem. However, the group should take a moment to rest. Or at least they would take a moment to rest if not for the fact that they would get sucked up into yet another portal. Where might this portal take them? Would it be another universe? Would we see all kinds of interesting new Sonic dimensions? Well, none, actually. The Archie Sonic comics would end shortly after this, and sadly, Gold, Von Schlemmer, and this version of Silver would never be seen again. However, if you want to get creative, maybe this portal just teleported them into the IDW universe, and Silver here is just the Silver from the other universe. I mean, it's not canon, but it's kind of fun to think of. It's a real shame. I've got to say, these characters are some of my favorites to come out of Archie, and they were tragically short-lived. I think Gold in general is a really interesting character, because if we look at the symbol on her head, we would see that it's actually the inner part of the symbol that Silver wears on his gloves. The two of them work really well as this kind of yin and yang that fit into each other. Silver is shown to have much stronger telekinetic powers, whereas Gold has telepathic powers, and together they create one unique being. It's also kind of interesting that Gold very clearly is the opposite version of Silver. She's a gender bent version of Silver, she's a slightly different color, and oh my god, my mascot, not Sonic here, is exactly that. Are they from the same universe? Maybe. I also think that Gold in general is a really interesting character. She was created by Evan Stanley, who would go on to work for IDW, and we would see a lot of Gold live on throughout IDW in really interesting ways. I want to start with Whisper. So Whisper is this character that was introduced in IDW, and although she's a wolf and not a Teneric like Gold, Whisper is pretty interesting because I feel like color palette wise, she shares a lot with Gold, and it's quite interesting that Whisper also makes her debut while paired alongside with Silver, kind of similarly to how Gold had made her debut, paired alongside with Silver, and the two work really well together. It's also worth noting that, like Surge, Gold is also a Teneric, and we can see some interesting design similarities between the two. I think one of the most interesting ones is that where hedgehogs tend to have really pointy spikes on the back of their heads, the Tenerics that Evan Stanley depicts here often have really long fur, and we can see that as well with Surge whenever she has her hair down. She has honestly a pretty strikingly similar design in fur to that of Gold. It's pretty cool, and like I said, I feel like we can see Gold live on in a sort of interesting way throughout these characters. Now, with that, we've come to the end of the video, and I want to thank you for watching it this far along. If you feel as though it deserved a like, a comment, a subscribe, or whatever, it would be greatly appreciated. But as always, I can't force you to do anything. I'm not your boss. I just hope that you have a good one.